See. Yeah. Oh, good morning. I beg your pardon. Have we been properly introduced? Stevie the Guide here, not in Kerrville, Texas this morning, at my mom's house in Houston. I'm trying to help her sell her house down here. It's about the only reason I want to come to Houston. But we had a nice little gathering, little luncheon. Very much thanks to Anna Wang for bringing realtor friends and signs and balloons. And I just appreciate your help so very much. And so I am broadcasting to you from Houston, Texas this morning. And it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and I am continuing to do whatever I can to try to raise the vibration of humanity. And I truly believe that if we can raise our own vibration and thus help others raise theirs, at some point there will be a collective a collective harmony that will make big changes in this world. And I believe that is the Christ consciousness, the second coming of Christ, if you will. I believe it is not in a physical form, but it is in the vibrational form that Christ will return. And a collective knowledge will sweep over humanity. I honestly believe this. And so we do whatever we can to wake up to this, to raise our vibration, to have that cymatic reaction collectively that will change the dynamics of everything. And so do with that what you will. It comes to me intuitively, folks, and as I practice, my fear level drops and drops, and it's been a good exercise for me. And whoever's been watching, thank you, and encouraging me, sending me little notes. I really appreciate it very, very much. I'll be continuing on with this explanation of my experiences at Finca Ambiwasi down in Colombia. This is run by the famous Taita Juanito, my friend from the swimming pool in Costa Rica. Juanito Chindoy is actually from the jungle, but he has a beautiful little farm and retreat center outside Bogota, Colombia, up in the mountains of Sylvania. And what I've been talking about the last several days, this has turned into Psychedelic Week here, because I've first given some background of psychedelics in general, the therapeutic value that's gotten from time immemorial, but in this country more like back in the 50s when Johns Hopkins started using it, and how Bill W. started the Alcoholics Anonymous program after a psychedelic experience he had, and how Timothy Leary and company started spreading it all over creation, which created chaos because you're using psychedelic substances without respect, without setting and supervision, and which can create chaos and is not helpful. It's not a recreational tool; it's a therapeutic tool. Now, it has a tremendous amount of fun to it, but to use psychedelics properly, in my opinion, they should be used under the supervision of elders who know what they're doing, people who have been trained since forever. And we're only now just getting back our rights to study the natural plants of the land, and understand how they can benefit mankind, especially as we are in this epidemic of mental health, depression, anxiety, and opioids, alcoholism, drug abuse, midlife crisis, call it what you want. People are imbalanced. Wealthy people are frustrated, and not all of them. Hey, they say if money cannot buy happiness, but you get to spend your misery in some of the nicest places. And so, but the point is that there's a general imbalance, whether you have money or not money. It is not based upon that. It is based upon a healthy balance in your left and right brain. And the psychoactive plants help you do that, all right? And they help you identify problems and eliminate them. Now, what I talked about, and here's a quote that I liked, and I don't know the author. I apologize who wrote this, but it says, everything that happens to you is a reflection of what you believe about yourself. We cannot outperform our level of self-esteem. We cannot draw to ourselves more than we think we are worth. One of the greatest regrets in life is being what others would want you to be rather than being yourself. All right. Now, I like that quote a lot, and I believe that. And I think we often, all of us, are, at least society, our culture, our parents, our schools, our churches, all attempt to drive us into being a person that they want us to be. But at some point, folks, we've got to break out of the cocoon and develop intuitively, instead of just following the rules and regulations with the left brain logical. The right brain intuitive must come back into balance, and we follow ourselves. We follow who we think we should be, and that is how we are happiest. I personally believe that schools should be much more about the business of identifying the unique qualities in each individual and then trying to support them in that. And instead of shoving 40 kids into a classroom and saying, okay, we're all going to learn this and this and this, and if you don't do that, then you're somehow lesser or bad or whatever. You force kids into a setting where they have to sit still all the time, and it's like having a Labrador Retriever puppy and expecting it to sit still in class for 6 or 8 hours a day. I mean, you would have an insane puppy, and that kind of thing is forcing us into these channels and education that we may or may not be receptive to is causing people to be crazy. And anyway, so everything that happens to you is a reflection of what you believe about yourself. We cannot outperform our level of self-esteem. We cannot draw to ourselves more than we think we are worth. One of the greatest regrets in life is being what others would want you to be rather than being yourself. So be yourself. There's another quote I had as well, that you are one. This is Alex Gray. You are one with the same force that provides the spiral arms of the galaxy. That universal creativity. It's also what you are as well. And when the mystic eye is open and sees that, a person is forever changed. When the mystic eye is open and that mind's eye, that small, still voice, and when you're able to listen to that inner self and see yourself through that higher vision, it changes people's lives. Just look back all over history. These changes happen in people, and it is not always through the psychedelic experience, but those who have tried psychedelics commonly report that they start to look at life intuitively through their own ability to evaluate rather than the rules and regulations of society. And I would suggest to you that is exactly what happened to me in these experiences, not just in Fink Ambiwasi, not just in psychedelic experiences, but with this series of events with the Kundalini awakening I had during meditation, and the vibrational healing treatments I got in Costa Rica, and my experience with the Buddhist monks, starting with the Venerable Hung Yi, who's the abbot of the Jade Buddha Temple in Houston, and going out to the American Bodhi Center outside of Houston in Hempstead. If you ever have a chance to go out there, it's open to the public. It's a 500-acre Buddhist retreat center, meditation center. A lovely giant meditation hall there, and just looking at life from these different perspectives, and then eventually going down to Finca Ambiwasi, which I went down to because I was depressed. I was in a situation where I didn't quite know how to get out of it, and I needed something, and I wouldn't take pharmaceutical drugs. And so I opted for a natural method that I learned about in South America, and I'm very glad I did. And so what I've talked about over the last several days is leading up to, and yesterday I talked about going to Finca Ambiwasi in Colombia, and that was in September of 2017. I accepted an invitation to go down to a 12-day healing retreat with about 50 other people, and the whole place was filled with the most loving, gentle, knowledgeable caregivers of every different flavor and variety. Wonderful people that cared for me down there, wonderful food, and certainly the most high impact experiences psychologically of my life. Now, yesterday I talked about the first night. We were there for 12 days, and we had 4 nights of ayahuasca ceremony. And on the first night, just in the first, it was about 8 or 10 hours, I resolved issues with my deceased father, with my mother, with my brother, and I was reintroduced to all of my ancestors through these experiences. And I was hugged and loved and cared for, and looked closely. The medicine had me look very closely at how I was behaving and how I was creating friction in my life and my relationships, and especially with regard to my father, who I had built walls against. And I didn't cry when he died, and then I go down to this place, and I have this series of vivid memories about all these happy times growing up, and it altered my my brainwave patterns about my father. It changed my DNA somehow, and now when I think of my father, I don't think initially. I remember the hard times that we had, and I remember the times he made me feel small, but my primary memories have now been altered, and the first memories that come to my mind when I remember my dad are those beautiful childhood memories of when we laughed and played and shared together and hunted together and played baseball together and all those wonderful things. And I remember that he was my friend, and I loved him very, very much. And what did I get? I got my dad back. All right. Now, if I went down to Colombia for no other reason than that, my friends, that was worth it in spades. All right, to get that bond with my father back, it was very important to me. And now that when I think of him, I remember much more about how close we were, and I had forgotten that, frankly. Because I had built these emotional walls against him, and we had a lot of friction in my teens and 20s especially, and so I was grateful. That was only the first night. That was just the beginning, what I told you yesterday. Now, moving into night number 2, when we drank the very next night, you have 12 days, you have about 3 days of preparation, education, and so forth. Then you go up to ceremony about 8 o'clock, and it goes till well after sunrise the next day. And I got 50 people plus all the shamans in this big Maloka building with fires going, and it is a phenomenal experience. And so you have 3 days of preparation, 2 nights of ceremony, 2 days of rest, 2 more nights of ceremony, and then a couple of days of rest and reflection. Now, I'll tell you this, and I was talking to my friend yesterday about creating some trips down to this place, and I think that that's what's going to happen. I'm going to start offering heavily supervised trips. Now, you can go down and do ayahuasca anywhere you want. What I will offer is in a package. I will give the benefit of my knowledge to people and visit with them, prepare them to go down there, what to expect and how to prepare for it. And then I will go with them for 12 days down there, and we can spend time talking and doing notes. I can tell you, I wouldn't be able to tell you half of this stuff if I had not written careful field notes every morning after I did this. And I'm so grateful. I thank myself for every day after these evenings, these powerful evenings, going down after I had a shower and some breakfast and just sitting down and writing notes about everything that I saw and felt. I'm very glad I did that. I went home to Houston, I typed it all up, and I was able to put more detail in it. And I got about 32 pages of notes from what happened. That's the only reason I'm able to tell you more about it now. I would remember the highlights, but a lot of these details in this report I cannot remember now. And so I would help people to do that and to turn over what they've seen and felt. And then when we come home, I would give them some more counsel about how to integrate that back into their lives and how it's going. And so that I'm going to start offering packages like that to a handful of people to go down there with me. I know a lot of people, some people would just think nothing of getting on an airplane and going to Colombia and going to something like this. But a lot of people need a little more handheld type of experience, and I'm going to start offering that. But anyway, the first night is what I call the drop off the baggage night. And I dropped off a lot of emotional baggage on the first night of ceremony at Finca Ambiwasi. And I dropped off emotional baggage, like I said, about my father and my mother and my brother, and I was surrounded by these elders of, going back through time. I met not just my grandparents and great-grandparents, but I met everybody, all right? And it was a phenomenal experience, and that was the end, a big celebration. Everyone was hugging, and it was very deeply meaningful to me. And so, and the next night, it was kind of like in this quote from The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. After the Grinch realizes that Christmas is something more, he decides to take all the presents back. And the quote, Boris Karloff narrates that very well, and he says, "And now that his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light." And that's the way I felt, I felt much lighter going into that second night. I had dumped off a bunch of baggage, and which I left in Colombia. So I went into the second night, and I'll try to describe for you what happened in the second night. Let's see. Hang on. Here we go. This is the man I met. This is Taita Juanito Chindoy. Wonderful man, my good friend. And let's see. Yeah, there he is. And that's the shaman. You have all sorts of helpers, but he's the head honcho. And So we go into this second night, and my heart's feeling much lighter as I go in there, and and we drink a cup of ayahuasca, and I started to see, after it started taking effect, and after, most importantly, after I actively gave it permission to take charge. And this is an unusual thing. All throughout these notes, it was, you don't just drink it and it comes upon you. You drink it, you start to feel the effects. And then when you start to see something and have contact with something, you have to actively give it permission. All right. And when the minute I gave it permission, it started to basically drive the car, mentally. When the first sort of wave of this stuff hit the beach of my mind, I would have to acknowledge its presence. And then I would have to give it permission to take me on a tour. And it did. And in this case, in the second night, I started to notice this. It looked like a playing card, like the back of a bicycle playing card, not the numbered part, but the other part. And I felt like I was in some sort of Egyptian temple or tomb or ruins of some kind, and I had discovered this interesting writing on the wall, and I was looking at it very intently, and it looked like Egyptian hieroglyphics is what it looked like. And I remember in my mind's eye, I was examining these hieroglyphics when all of a sudden I started to see little colors move around through it, and as I was looking at it, it started to move. The whole thing started to move, and I was a little taken aback. I was like, "Wow, this thing's alive." It was very much like on The Wizard of Oz. You remember when Dorothy she discovers the Tin Man, and she's tapping on his foot, and she's checking him out, and she looks at him. She goes, "Why, it's a man!" And that's the way I felt. This thing was alive. It was like a playing card figure, much like on Alice in Wonderland, when the Queen of Hearts had all these card people. And who was it? Lewis Carroll that wrote Alice in Wonderland. Well, the guy was tripping when he wrote it. Okay, if you've ever been a fan of that story, it came from a psychedelic experience. All right, this was very much like that. These card people. This one, once I noticed who he was. And then he was excited. He started to kind of giggle and move around. And he was excited that I could see him. And mentally we were talking. And I said to him, hello, you can do whatever you want. I'm here. And something like that. And you don't use words when you're in an ayahuasca journey. It's all telepathic. And so I was sending him these signals that all was well and that he could proceed. And with that, I started to look down to the right, and a whole line of these card people were there. And I started to look. They had a little face on top of them with a little card body, and they all had these sort of hieroglyphic writings, different ancient writings, let's say. And they were all happy to see me. They all started to giggle and chit-chat, and it was a welcoming committee. It was a receiving line of different people of all different nationalities, sometimes from way back in time. And don't ask me how I know this. I just do. Much information comes to you that you cannot explain. It is not downloadable into as low-dimensional a language as English, as Terence McKenna says. The syntactical machinery undergoes some hyper-dimensional change, and you cannot explain totally how you know these things or exactly what transpired, but I'm pedaling as fast as I can. And so I'm in this receiving line with all these card people who are excited to see me, and I start moving down the line, greeting them and saying hello, and they give me a gift. It was a little cupcake looking thing, and I asked them what it was, and they said, it's yourself, we're giving you yourself. And I didn't exactly know what they meant, but I was like, okay, myself, I'll take it, and it was a very pleasurable, welcoming, safe feeling environment, and I was very happy to be in their presence. And they were certainly happy that I was there and that I could see them and communicate with them. And so I moved down the line, and there was a little incident where I looked off to the side and I saw a little dark figure, sort of with his back turned to me. And when I decided to go over there and see him. And it was a little, it looked like, if you ever read a little storybook called Where the Wild Things Are, there's a little bear sort of creature with these spiky little things on him. He looked like that, and he was crying. And I went over there and I talked to him, and I said, "What's the matter?" And what I knew about him was he was some of the dark energy that I had been storing. All right, and I went up and he told me that he was going to be leaving, and I said, well, I gave him a hug, and I told him, that I was grateful that he had cared for me and protected me in a lot of ways, but that he would go and turn into something else that would help people or help me, or whatever it was. It's hard to describe this encounter with a sort of a darker side of myself, and I was peacefully and in a friendly way dismissing him is what I was doing, and thereby my heart was lighter and feeling better. And so when I came back to the receiving line with all the card people, they all seemed to really appreciate that I'd gone over and comforted this darker energy in myself and released it. And so anyway, this was my my introduction into what I call the Great Hall, and what an experience that was. They paid me compliments and respect, and they gave me a gift, a beautiful gift, another thing, I said goodbye to all of them, and I began to woke up. And an interesting thing about ayahuasca that I observed was that in the handful of other psychedelic experiences, I tried LSD and I tried mushrooms before. And that was back in the 80s. This was in 2017 when I did this. But back in the 80s, when I used these things recreationally, well, I would see colors and shapes and stuff when my eyes were open. But with ayahuasca, nothing. There was no imaging unless my eyes were closed. When I opened my eyes, I was almost sober. Even though I was in the midst of this experience, when I would open my eyes and look around the room, I did not see any visual images, and I came back into this reality, and so I was kind of awake for a little while. I thought this part of the trip was over, but I was wrong about that. I woke up. I had to vomit into my little bucket, and when I did, there was a releasing of this sort of idle, depressed part of me. I had an image of living in Houston and working in real estate, and this sort of depressed feeling of not being in the right profession, and that I was in this idle state. I wasn't this active, vibrant agent like I had been before. I was in this, I don't really want to go and talk to these clients. The clients that I had in Houston were, so abrasive. Perhaps it was the energy I was projecting. I don't know. But I had some very negative real estate experiences there. Anyway, I had a vision of myself that I didn't want to see anymore, which was, not happy in my career. And I started discarding that person, hopefully never to be seen again. And this was a further releasing of heavier energy. So that was a little, let's say, a little intermission in between these two events. I had the receiving line of the card people. I had the dropping of the sort of depressed, idle self. And then I move into, I laid back down on my little chaise lounge they give you up in this building. And I laid there thinking that the trip was over, but it wasn't. And as I laid there with my eyes closed, it appeared as if I was staring up into a beautiful night sky. And there were stars twinkling everywhere, and it was so beautiful. And as I watched, the stars began to fall down on me, and I was just entranced by this beautiful scene. And then the stars began to touch me, and I could feel a energetic pleasure as they touched me. And as I started feeling myself going back into this situation, again, I gave it permission. And I started to hear giggling and chattering, and the stars were moving around. And I was reminded that I came to the realization that these twinkling little stars, and they all started turning multicolors. I began to get the distinct impression that these little stars were beings, and I began to acknowledge them and give them permission, and it made them so excited, and that I could see them and communicate with them, and I'm reminded of of Terence McKenna. He is a hysterically funny psychonaut. Terence McKenna, the famous Berkeley professor that talked all about his psychedelic experiences. Go check him out on YouTube. Terence McKenna, he talked about whenever he would smoke DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine. It's the active ingredient in ayahuasca. When he ever took ayahuasca or smoked DMT, he always got elves, elves or fairies. He always, and they chatter and they talk with him and stuff. And I came to the realization that I had encountered Terence McKenna's elves. And they are brilliant light beings, and that nowadays, whenever I hear the term fairies, or I read a book not long ago on the advice of a friend, a very long book called The Mists of Avalon. Mists of Avalon talks about King Arthur and the Druids and these magical fairies and stuff that were all part of English lore. Fairies, that's what they were, twinkling little tinker bells everywhere. And I began to realize, let's see, he says, Terence McKenna always gets elves, little multiform beings who come to visit him, play with him, chitter-chatter, dance around and laugh with him, and seem happy he is there. They look like stars, sparkles, streaks, and other indescribable forms. They move quickly, sometimes before your eyes, and sometimes with a pleasurable tingle through your eyes, head, or body. All right? That is exactly what happened to me. And I realized that I was in the presence of the force that creates universes, all right? The force that creates everything. and that I was a part of that. I was a family member, and what they did that night was embrace me as one of their own, and to help me realize who I was. Now, I will say, some people will say, well, that wasn't real. Okay, that was just a hallucination. You were just twisted off on this drug. Okay, I submit to you that what exactly is real. All right. If I have a situation like I described yesterday, where I imagine that I have this relationship with my father, and I see all these various memories, and I get the feeling that he's right there with me, and it changes the way I think, and it helps me unload emotional baggage. Doesn't matter what you think is real, pal. What's real to you doesn't matter. What matters is what's real to the individual it's happening to, and how it changes his behavior, and how it improves or doesn't improve his life. That's what's real. And let me tell you something. These elves that I saw, these fairies or light beings, they are as real to me as I'm sitting here talking to you now. They're as real to me as anything else, and for the rest of my life, I will know that they are around, and that they care for me. They express such deep love and appreciation for me, and what happened was quite amazing. The receiving line that I got in the first part of the evening was leading me into a grand concert hall, the Great Hall. And I was a honored guest there, and everyone was thrilled that I had finally come, and that I could see them, and that I could talk to them, and here's how I described it, and I'll just read it to you. They were so happy to see me, and they delighted. Their activity increasing whenever I actively acknowledged them and spoke to them telepathically. When I could communicate with them and talk to them, they just got more and more excited that I was there, and I started to communicate with them. And I remember thinking, so this is what Terence McKenna was talking about. And they all started laughing louder and zooming around faster within this increasingly carnival-esque landscape. This carnival-like atmosphere was present there. It was this giant hall, and everybody was just having a blast, and all these light beings buzzing around like a little energetic beehive, and it was amazing. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life, and I was right there in the middle of it, and I was at the greatest show on earth, and I felt so honored to be in their presence. Zoom, zoom, zoom. I was in a hive of friendly psychedelic bees on rocket fuel. Their energy was boundless, and they kept transferring some of it to me with every one of them that made contact with me. Whenever they would make contact with me and they'd touch me somehow, it gave me some kind of energetic energy, and it was so pleasurable. It's indescribable how wonderful it felt. And they were all in some way mixing with me, and connecting their energy with mine, and making me realize that I was part of that family. And I was just so honored. Their energy was boundless, and their energy was boundless. They kept transferring some of it to me with every one of them to make contact with me. This delicious energy bled into my soul and reverberated throughout my nervous system. It was unbelievable. And then they told me they had a gift. I'm just going to read this because thank God I took these field notes. I wouldn't remember half of this, but every morning I diligently went down and wrote everything I could remember about the night before. And so then they told me they had a gift, and they presented a sprawling large table in front of me with jewels and sparkly things and treasure all over it. The multicolors were spectacularly radiant. And in the center of the table on a pedestal was a big thumper of a diamond, and I marveled at this thing. And the moment I locked eyes on it, they threw it at my forehead and it entered and impacted my brain with a blinding flash and coursed through every fiber of my being and beaconed out of every pore. It was a cool purgative fire that seemed to cleanse and heal, a type of cosmic full-body Drano that scrubbed every nook and cranny of my being and every vein and capillary of my body and washed out the undesirables. It was a cleansing gift that they gave to me of some kind. And I was dazzled and wished to express thanks for this amazing feeling of health and strength. But before I could even formulate a response to this amazing feeling, there was a frenzied chatter of laughter, after which they informed me, all these light beings, informed me that they had decided to just give it all to me. And there was a happy celestial applause throughout the hall in agreement, as a vibrant feeling of joy permeated the whole space. And the multitude of jewels on the table, as well as all of the stars and streaks and other beings, began to cheer and twinkle brightly, some even popping off like fireworks. The brilliance and intensity of colored lights was beyond description. All right. This is what happened to me at Finca Ambiwasi. And the table of jewels that I mentioned that was before me began to tip towards me, and each colorful piece pouring first into my chest and torso and then all over me. And I could feel the savory, nutritional energy of each one with a never before felt sense of pleasure. But I began to express my concern that I did not deserve so much wealth and attention. And a huge chorus of laughter and cheers rose up from way down every corner of every corridor into the great hall in which we celebrated. There was just a roar of laughter in this place when I told them that I was not worthy. They just thought it was the funniest thing they had ever heard. And a huge chorus of laughter and cheers rose up from way down every corridor in the great hall which we celebrated. That thought of unworthiness brought down the house. All right. And they said in a roaring unison, "That's because you think too much, Stevie. You deserve all of this and more. You are a king, Stevie. You always have been. You just forgot. You deserve everything we have, and you will go forward knowing your royal bloodline as a king from this day forward." And they all cheered ever louder at my complete astonishment. Astonished is a good word for this entire exercise. Astonished. I was absolutely astonished. Terence McKenna says he doesn't think you could die from the ayahuasca experience, but you might die from astonishment. And now I know what he's talking about. I was absolutely astonished at what happened. And they were cheering and buzzing and giving me all these little jewels. And they said, but now that you know who you are, and this is all telepathically, they're giving it to me at a high rate of download speed, believe me. They said, but now that you know who you are, you must be a good king. You must use the gifts and share the gifts for people and for the planet. That's when I remembered the earth. And I touched the floor and gave the earth a little jolt of my newfound energy. It's as if I connected right to the earth and all the way to the core and gave it some of this celestial energy that was being given to me. And don't ask me, to explain that. It's just what happened. So they say to me, go out, start with your mother, your brother, then go to the rest of the world. Help the world, love the world, make them feel good, shine joy. Always use the words and actions for their pleasure. Lift them, read them, heal their pain and troubles. You know how, Stevie. Know what they need and give it to them. You know what they need and give it to them. Never forget the responsibilities of your position. Being a king is not just receiving gifts, but governing and caring for with kindness, loving kindness. Must work every day. No time to waste. Busy all the time. Shine joy. Shine happiness. Shine, shine, shine. Understand now. Don't forget now. Never forget now. Be here now. And we are so happy you know it now, and we are happy to serve you. And as they departed, they said, be a good king. Not forget who you are. We love you very, very muchly. Honored to serve you. Be well, king. We are here and never leave you. Be well. And as they were gone, and then they were gone, and I missed them the moment they left. I kept looking at the ceiling and waving goodbye, and they kept telling me, they were touching me right here and telling me, don't forget who you are. Don't forget who you are. And it was the greatest honor of my human life. It was, bar none. You know, I always like to say that the greatest thing in my life is the birth of my children. But let me tell you something. Nothing. The birth of my children was the greatest honor in this human life. But in the celestial heavens where I went, that honor belongs to these light beings, and the ceremony that they gave to me, and the gifts they gave to me, and the knowledge of who I am. And what was the result of all this bizarre happenings up there, folks? It raised my self-esteem. You can say, oh, that didn't happen. That was a hallucination, you know. Whatever it was, it raised my self-esteem. It gave me a broader awareness. It caused me to behave differently. I promise you, the only reason I'm sitting here talking to you now is because of them, all right, and what they gave me. That's the only reason that I have dropped a lot of the fear and tried my best to be a good king and to raise the vibration of this planet, try to help people feel better, to try to do whatever I can in my own clumsy human way. I'm going to do that until the day I die, all right? Because that's what I'm supposed to do. And they gave me awareness. They raised my self-esteem. They gave me marching orders, and they told me to do whatever I can to help human beings and to make them feel better. And that's why I run around at the grocery store somewhere and say, hey, have I told you that I loved you today? It's like a paycheck to me when somebody's eyes light up and their posture gets a little better and they say, why, no. And I say, well, I love you. And sometimes I get hugs and sometimes I get weird looks. But I do whatever I can to raise the vibration of my fellow human beings. I do whatever I can to share the love that Christ taught us about, to have that Christ consciousness, that higher awareness, and to share the love of Christ every way I can. And if it means I'm a strange outcast, so be it. All right. I've learned that the things of this world are often somewhat of a distraction. We got to have some money in order to survive. We've got to do certain things. But this is not the big picture, folks. The big picture is eternal. And that hit home more than you could possibly imagine. All right. And I can imagine quite a lot. But anyway, so I came out of that a different person, a completely different person. And so that was the only cup of the second night of ayahuasca ceremony down in Colombia. I only drank one time, and there was an interesting thing that happened too. That's worth note, and it's back here. Is I started to have this conversation with my body. All right, and let's see if I can find that. It was back here. I'm sorry. I saw this thing this morning, and it's worth noting that I started talking to my body in this unusual way, and another of many things that came to me during these experiences was an awareness of my physical body. And as I came off of this thing on the first night, I started speaking. These higher beings started talking to me about the body, and I started talking about my body in an unusual way, and it kind of went like this. When I on the first night and throughout the whole session, I began to have this new relationship with this human body, and it was. I started saying, I began very slowly began to realize I was back, and I was cold, and the sensations into my semi-conscious state. You're kind of what they call drunk on the medicine, and so you're in a semi-intoxicated state, although you have awareness. It's very unusual, hard to describe. But anyway, I started having this unusual conversation with my body, and I started to get the feeling of myself and about my body to think of it as a precious car or vehicle, not part of myself, but something highly valuable which had been loaned to me. This body. In fact, I began to think of it in association with all human life as a highly valuable thing that I get to use. I also noticed that my mental sentences were shortened when describing my body to myself, and it went like this. I very slowly began to realize that my back was cold, the sensation sweeping into my semi-conscious state. A message started coming in, body getting cold. Must protect body. Then I ignored it for a while and went back into sort of a daze, and I completely consumed in the joy of being back in my seat, and I was sort of dozing there, and then the message started coming to me louder. Body getting cold. Protect body. Human being must protect. You are responsible. Body needs clothes. Gradually, it dawned on me that I was stripped to the waist after this ceremony thing I went to, and it's cold in there. It's not freezing, but it's chilly, and so I was unaware of my having my shirt off, and it says body's naked, pick up shirt. And finally, with this heroic effort, I pick up my shirt and I start getting dressed again. And then it starts thanking me. It's like, oh, body warmer, good, must protect body. And then so I finally laid back down. My chest is warm, and then it starts up again after a little while. It says feet are cold, also part of body. Body is precious. Human life is precious. Must protect body. Never hurt the body. Care for the body. I ignore this for a while as I'm dazing, and everything seems to be very labored when you're in this ayahuasca, drunkenness, they call it. Although it's not like drunk on alcohol, but they call it drunk on the medicine, which is an entirely different thing. It says, I'm ignoring it, I'm getting this call that the feet are cold, and then it's more persistent. Feet getting colder. You are responsible. Care for feet. Again, I rise up and I put on my socks, and it says, so happy. Feet warm. Feet happy. Feet, thank you for care. Happy feet. Yay. And so, I settle back down. I'm warmer, and then it's more persistent. Body needs a blanket, then another, and then a pillow for the head, and then a tissue. And I finally, I get all warm again, and it starts saying, body's dehydrated. Body must have water. Body, and so I make this valiant effort to get my water bottle and drink some water. And so, but I guess the point is that this ayahuasca experience was driving home this notion of that I have been loaned this very valuable thing called a human body. It's a loaner that I was blessed to get to use for a little while so that I could come here. And that I was responsible to take care of it and feed it correctly and exercise it, give it the things that it needs, pay attention to what it's asking me for. I would say that since I came back from there, another perk that I got from this whole experience, we talked about dumping off emotional baggage with people in my life. We talked about raising my self-esteem and realizing that I have a more elevated position than I ever imagined, and that I have a human body that I've got to take care of. And I'm just grateful. I'm very grateful for all of that. And so you can do with all that what you will. That is the second night. You just go through a few hours of this, and it's almost as if you've been gone for years. Time has no meaning in this ayahuasca experience. You can go through all sorts of stuff that would take you days or years to sift through. I'm telling you, what Jason Silva talks about in that first page, wherever it went, he talks about, I'll quote it again, Jason Silva. Jason Silva is the host of National Geographic Channel's Brain Games. He has wonderful little video rants on YouTube, Jason Silva. He was being interviewed by the Huffington Post on why humans need to explore the medicinal use of psychedelics for mental health. And Jason Silva's answer was, imagine compressing a decade of therapy into 3 hours. All right. You are immediately plunged into a dialogue with your own subconscious. You could have the cathartic breakthroughs that 10 years of hard therapy might give you in one afternoon. All right. Now, you can say what you want, and especially if you've never done this before, you haven't got a clue. All right. I can tell you what an apple tastes like all day, but until you bite into one and have some, you don't know what that experience is. And so all I can do is try to relay to you some of what happened and the benefits to my life that I got from it. I am not a mental health expert or not a licensed anything when it comes to health. But I have had some experiences that I'm willing to share, and I am going to start thinking about developing some tours down there and to other places, and I'm going to give personal care to people that go on these tours with me, and take them to this healing retreat. Give them some counsel before and after, and try to, just the benefit of my own experience and how to prepare for this, what to expect, and then, kind of how to use it later. But the only reason really that I'm sitting here talking to you now is because a lot of my fear and my heavier baggage, it doesn't instantly change your life. You don't drink ayahuasca and all of a sudden your life is, instantly perfect. It doesn't happen that way. What the shamans will tell you down there is that the medicine will give you 50%. They will give you understanding of where you need to go and what you need to do. And you're responsible for the other 50% to care for your body, to mend your relationships, to offload the baggage and let go of some things, and to realize that you are more valuable than you ever imagined. And that body of yours, you are extremely lucky. In whatever shape your body's in, you're extremely lucky to have it. I am lucky to have mine, and I became much more humble and grateful and more thoughtful towards my fellow human beings because I went there, and I started dropping a lot of the fear that I've had ever since I was a little boy, of what people think, And I'm now dedicated to developing my life in an intuitive way where I can share with people my honest, true human being experience. And hopefully somebody will get some benefit out of it. I'm on a mission from God to raise my vibration and to try to radiate that to anybody I can. And in my own clumsy little human being way, I'm trying to do good and trying to share love, just like those little light beings shared with me. And so I hope you have a great day. It's 6 o'clock now, and it's going to be a beautiful day. Go out, share some love with people, and I'll see you tomorrow. And this is Stevie the Guide. I'll be back in Kerrville, Texas tomorrow, and I love you very, very much. Have a great one.